For years, Lady Sarah McCorkadale, Princess Diana's older sister, stayed silent. But now, at 60, she's finally speaking out, revealing shocking details that could change everything we thought we knew about Diana's tragic fate. Why now? What does she know that the world doesn't? And could her words expose a hidden truth about the most mysterious royal death in history? Stay with us, because this revelation might just rewrite Diana's story forever. Who is Lady Sarah McCorkadale? Lady Sarah McCorkadale has remained a lesser-known figure in the dramatic story of the British royal family, often overshadowed by the immense presence of her younger sister, Princess Diana. However, her influence on Diana's life and her proximity to some of the most significant royal events cannot be ignored. Born into the prestigious Spencer family on the 19th of March 1955, Sarah was the eldest of 4 children. The Spencer lineage was deeply intertwined with the British monarchy. Her father, John Spencer, later became the 8th Earl Spencer, and their family home, Althorp, was steeped in aristocratic history. While Sarah lived a life of privilege, it was Diana who ultimately became the most famous Spencer of all. But before Diana captured the world's attention, it was Sarah who had an unexpected connection to Prince Charles, a relationship that would later lead to unforeseen consequences. Growing up, Sarah and Diana shared a bond that was both affectionate and at times distant. Their family life was not the fairy tale that many assumed. When Sarah was just 14 and Diana was 8, their parents went through a bitter divorce. Their mother, Frances Shand Kyde, left their father for another man, an event that deeply impacted the Spencer children. John Spencer fought for full custody and won, leaving Sarah and her siblings to be raised in an environment of emotional turmoil. For Diana, who idolized Sarah, her older sister represented a source of guidance and support. But as they grew older, their paths diverged. While Sarah maintained a relatively private life, avoiding the pressures of royal expectations, Diana was thrust into the spotlight, changing their dynamic forever. As the eldest, Sarah had a level of maturity and independence that Diana often lacked. She was confident, outspoken, and unafraid to challenge authority. These qualities made her stand out in aristocratic circles, but also led to a pivotal moment in history: her brief romance with Prince Charles. This relationship, although short-lived, would change the course of Diana's life in ways that no one could have predicted. The question remains, did Sarah unknowingly lead her sister into the most tragic chapter of royal history? To understand the full weight of Sarah's role, we need to examine the surprising love triangle that would alter the future of the British monarchy. The shocking love triangle: Sarah, Charles, and Diana. Long before Diana and Prince Charles became one of the most talked about couples in history, there was another woman in the Spencer family who had caught the prince's eye: Lady Sarah McCorkodale. Their romance began in the mid-1970s, a time when Charles, the future King of England, was under immense pressure to find a suitable bride. At the time, Sarah was an attractive, well-educated, and socially respected young woman who seemed like an ideal match for the prince. They spent time together at royal events, engaged in long conversations, and even went on private trips. To many, it seemed as though Sarah was being groomed to become a future queen. But Sarah had other ideas. Unlike many young women who would have been thrilled by the idea of marrying into royalty, Sarah was far from enamored by the thought of becoming a princess. In an interview with Time magazine in 1978, she made a statement that would later haunt her: "I wouldn't marry Charles if he were the dustman or the King of England." These words not only put an end to any speculation about their future, but also signaled that Sarah saw qualities in Charles that made him unsuitable as a husband, qualities that Diana, years later, would painfully discover for herself. The reason for their breakup was never fully detailed, but many believe that Sarah was put off by the intense media scrutiny that came with dating a future king. However, Sarah's connection to Charles didn't end with their split. Just a year after their relationship ended, she introduced him to her younger sister Diana. At the time, Diana was only 16, while Charles was 29. The introduction took place at the Spencer family home in Althorp, and though Diana was still a teenager, Charles reportedly saw something in her that made her a potential bride. It's unclear whether Sarah ever regretted bringing them together, but years later, after seeing the destruction of Diana's marriage, many wondered if she felt responsible. Did she unknowingly push her sister into a doomed relationship? Was her introduction an act of sisterly support, or did she simply not realize the storm that was about to unfold? That introduction led to one of the most celebrated weddings in history, but behind the glamour, trouble was already brewing. The fairy tale wedding that wasn't so perfect. From the moment Diana and Charles announced their engagement in February of 1981, the world became obsessed with the royal romance. Their wedding, held on the 29th of July 1981, was watched by over 750 million people worldwide. Diana, only 20 years old, was radiant in her ivory silk taffeta gown, a dress that would go down in history as one of the most iconic wedding dresses ever made. The lavish ceremony at St. Paul's Cathedral had all the makings of a fairy tale, but behind the scenes, cracks had already begun to form. In one of the most telling moments before their wedding, Diana revealed that she had serious doubts about marrying Charles. She later confided to friends that she discovered a bracelet that Charles had custom-made for Camilla Parker Bowles, his longtime love interest. It was engraved with the letters G and F, short for their secret nicknames Gladys and Fred. Diana was devastated, but felt there was no way out. The wedding had been set, the public was eagerly awaiting the grand event, and backing out would have been unthinkable. Sarah, along with the rest of Diana's family, watched as she walked down the aisle, knowing that something wasn't right. Even the wedding vows contained a moment of unease. When asked if he loved Diana, Charles famously responded, "Whatever love means." It was an awkward statement that hinted at what was to come. Lady Sarah, having once dated Charles herself, must have recognized the warning signs, but at that point it was too late. Diana had been catapulted into a life that she was not prepared for, and Sarah, from the outside, could only watch as her sister's dream turned into a nightmare. While the public adored Diana, she was secretly struggling behind closed doors. Diana's battle behind closed doors. At first glance, Diana appeared to have everything: a title, wealth, a global fan base, and a husband who was next in line for the throne. But behind the lavish royal facade, the reality of her life was far from the fairy tale that the media portrayed. From the very beginning of her marriage, Diana struggled to find her place in a rigid royal system that was unprepared for someone like her. The expectations were suffocating, the scrutiny was relentless, and the pressure to be the perfect princess was more than she could handle. Lady Sarah, who had introduced Diana to Charles, watched from a distance as her sister's life spiraled into something she could no longer control. The first major sign that things were going wrong came shortly after Diana gave birth to Prince William in the summer of 1982. She fell into a deep postnatal depression that left her feeling isolated and helpless. The royal family, known for their stiff upper lip approach, saw emotional struggles as a sign of weakness. Diana later revealed that instead of receiving support, she was expected to carry on as though nothing was wrong. Feeling overwhelmed, she resorted to self-harm, a desperate attempt to express the pain she was unable to voice. She admitted in an interview years later, "I didn't like myself. I was ashamed that I couldn't cope." These confessions shocked the world, but for those closest to her, including Lady Sarah, they were not surprising. As the years passed, Diana's inner turmoil only deepened. The public adored her, but behind palace walls she was deeply unhappy. She developed bulimia, a disorder that she later described as her way of regaining some form of control in a life where everything else felt dictated by others. Charles, who had never truly been in love with her, distanced himself emotionally. Sarah, watching her younger sister unravel, must have wondered if she had done the right thing by introducing them. Did she ever try to intervene? Could she have helped Diana escape before it was too late? Diana wasn't the type to stay silent forever. Soon she would make a bold move that shocked the royal family. The confrontation that shocked the royal family. For years, Diana had been aware of her husband's affair with Camilla Parker Bowles. She had seen the signs, felt the coldness in her marriage, and had even overheard Charles on secret phone calls with the woman he had loved long before he met Diana. But it wasn't until 1986 that she decided she could no longer ignore the truth. In an act of quiet rebellion, Diana confronted Camilla at a party, an event that would go down as one of the most shocking moments in royal history. It was a private gathering attended by close friends of the royal family. Diana, dressed elegantly as always, appeared composed, but inside she was burning with rage. As the evening went on, she finally found the opportunity to pull Camilla aside. Standing in a dimly lit corner, away from the eyes of the other guests, she spoke with a calm yet piercing intensity. "I know what's going on," she said. "Don't treat me like I'm stupid." Camilla, caught off guard, didn't deny the affair. Instead, her response was chilling. She told Diana, "You have 2 beautiful sons. What more could you want?" It was as if she was telling Diana to accept the reality of the situation, to understand that Charles was never going to be truly hers. Diana later recalled this moment in interviews, describing how powerless she felt. This wasn't just a love triangle, it was a power struggle, and Diana knew she was losing. Lady Sarah, though not directly involved in this confrontation, must have heard about it in the aftermath. How did she feel knowing that she had once been in the exact same position as her sister, dating a man who was never fully emotionally available? Did she regret not warning Diana earlier? Or did she, like so many others, assume that Diana would eventually learn to tolerate the reality of royal life? But this was only the beginning of Diana's rebellion. Soon, she would start to suspect that her problems extended beyond just her husband's betrayal. Diana's fear, was she being watched? As the years passed, Diana became increasingly convinced that she was being watched. It wasn't just the endless presence of the paparazzi or the prying eyes of the press. She believed there were more powerful forces tracking her every move. In private conversations with close friends, including her personal staff, she voiced her concerns that her phone lines were being tapped, her letters were being read, and her movements were being monitored. Many dismissed these fears as paranoia, but Diana insisted that something wasn't right. One of the most chilling moments came in the early 1990s when she reportedly found a mysterious note inside her Kensington Palace residence. The note, written in a handwriting she didn't recognize, warned her that she was being followed. Whether this was a cruel prank or a legitimate warning remains unclear, but Diana took it seriously. She began using coded language in phone calls, avoiding certain routes when traveling, and even confiding in her former butler, Paul Burrell, that she feared someone was trying to harm her. Lady Sarah was one of the few people Diana still trusted at this time. She had always been more reserved and less involved in royal scandals, which meant she wasn't a target for leaks or betrayals. But did she believe Diana's fears? Or did she, like many others, assume that the pressure of royal life had made Diana overly anxious? It's impossible to know for sure. The mystery of the seatbelt, what really happened that night. The night of Diana's tragic accident on the 31st of August 1997 remains one of the most scrutinized events in modern history. The official story states that Diana, her companion Dodi Fayed, and their driver Henry Paul were in a black Mercedes speeding through the Pont de l'Ama tunnel in Paris, trying to evade aggressive paparazzi. Moments later, the car crashed into a concrete pillar, instantly killing Dodi and Henry Paul, while Diana was left with critical injuries. She was rushed to the hospital but was pronounced dead in the early hours of the next morning. But to this day, one question continues to haunt investigators, conspiracy theorists, and even Diana's own family. Why wasn't she wearing a seatbelt? Lady Sarah McCorkadale was deeply disturbed by this detail. Diana was known for her habit of always wearing a seatbelt, so why had she not worn one that night? Some believe it was simply a momentary lapse. Perhaps she was distracted or had forgotten. Others suggest a more sinister explanation, pointing to various conspiracy theories that argue Diana's death was not an accident at all. Some even claim that if she had been wearing her seatbelt, she would have survived the crash, as her injuries, though severe, might not have been fatal. In the aftermath of her sister's death, Lady Sarah joined Prince Charles in traveling to Paris to retrieve Diana's body. The moment was heartbreaking, but it also deepened Sarah's suspicions. Over the years, she has remained reserved about her thoughts on what truly happened that night. But her quiet determination in seeking answers suggests she has never been fully convinced by the official explanation. Whether her doubts are justified remains a question that may never be answered. But Diana's fears about her safety weren't just vague anxieties. She had written something chilling before her death. The letter that predicted her death. One of the most shocking revelations to emerge after Diana's death was a letter she had written just 10 months before the crash. The letter, which was kept by her former butler, Paul Burrell, contained a disturbing prediction. Diana wrote, "I am sitting here at my desk today in October, longing for someone to hug me and encourage me to keep strong and hold my head high. This particular phase in my life is the most dangerous. My husband is planning an accident in my car, brake failure, or some other injury to make the path clear for him to marry Camilla." When this letter was made public, it sent shockwaves around the world. Was this just the paranoia of a woman under immense pressure, or had Diana truly sensed that her life was in danger? Lady Sarah was among those who had known about Diana's fears, though whether she had seen the letter before the crash remains unclear. However, the fact that Diana had confided in so many about her worries suggests that she was not merely imagining things. Paul Burrell, the man who had safeguarded the letter, claimed that Diana had asked him to keep it as insurance, proof that if something happened to her, she had foreseen it. The implications were staggering. Was Diana's death orchestrated? Was it just an unfortunate accident, as the official inquiry concluded? Or was there something more to the story? And if there was more to the story, who was responsible? Was Diana's death an accident or something else? For years, the debate over whether Diana's death was truly an accident has raged on. Officially, the 1999 inquiry into the crash concluded that Henri Paul, the driver, had been intoxicated and was driving recklessly at high speeds. The report also noted that Diana and Dodi Fayed had not been wearing seatbelts, which contributed to the fatal outcome. But this explanation didn't satisfy everyone, especially Dodi's father, Mohammed Al-Fayed, who has spent decades insisting that his son and Diana were murdered. Theories about who might have wanted Diana dead range from MI6 to the royal family itself. Some believe that Diana's growing independence, humanitarian work, and potential marriage to Dodi Fayed posed a threat to powerful institutions. Others point to the strange inconsistencies in the investigation, including missing CCTV footage from the tunnel, Henri Paul's alleged connections to intelligence agencies, and conflicting witness statements. Lady Sarah has never publicly endorsed any conspiracy theories, but she has remained open to questioning the official narrative. Her loyalty to Diana was unwavering, and her desire for answers has been evident in her continued involvement with her sister's legacy. Even though inquiries have closed the case, many, including members of Diana's own family, believe the full truth has yet to be revealed. But despite the controversy surrounding her death, Diana's legacy would not be erased, and Lady Sarah played a crucial role in preserving it. Lady Sarah's role in preserving Diana's legacy. After Diana's death, Lady Sarah became one of the key figures in ensuring that her sister's humanitarian work was not forgotten. She was appointed as co-executor of Diana's will, a responsibility that meant overseeing how her vast estate was distributed. Sarah also played a major role in the Diana, Princess of Wales Memorial Fund, an organization dedicated to continuing the charitable work that had defined Diana's life. The fund provided millions in donations to causes Diana had supported, including those helping victims of landmines, HIV/AIDS patients, and the homeless. Unlike some members of the Spencer family who capitalized on their connection to Diana, Lady Sarah has largely stayed out of the public eye, focusing instead on quiet, meaningful work. She has maintained a strong relationship with Diana's sons, Prince William and Prince Harry, and has been seen attending various memorial events honoring her sister. Through all of this, one thing has remained clear. Lady Sarah never stopped loving or protecting Diana even after her death. The bond they shared as sisters was complex, sometimes distant, sometimes close, but in the end, Sarah proved her loyalty. She has never tried to rewrite history or profit from Diana's tragedy, instead choosing to keep her memory alive in a dignified manner. But despite all her efforts, there is one thing Lady Sarah deeply regrets. The one thing Lady Sarah wishes she could change. Looking back, Lady Sarah must have replayed certain moments in her mind over and over again. What if she had never introduced Diana to Charles? What if she had spoken up about the red flags she had seen in Charles during their brief relationship? Could she have warned Diana, or even convinced her to walk away before it was too late? These are questions that may never have answers, but it's clear that Sarah carries some level of regret. In private conversations, those close to her have suggested that she wishes she had been able to do more to protect Diana. The world sees Lady Sarah as the quiet, composed sister who largely stayed in the background, but behind closed doors, she was one of the few who truly understood Diana's struggles. She knew what it meant to be trapped in an aristocratic world where appearances mattered more than emotions, and she knew that Diana, despite her strength, was deeply vulnerable. But no matter what might have been done differently, one fact remains: Diana left an indelible mark on history. Her legacy is carried forward not just by her children, but by millions who admired her compassion, her resilience, and her determination to make a difference. Lady Sarah, despite her regrets, can take solace in the fact that her sister's memory will never fade. The people's princess may be gone, but she will never be forgotten.